My name's Tom Moore, and just to give a bit of background of who I am, I've spent the last 15 years working in the rail environment in both the UK and in Melbourne predominantly. And I'm a trained civil engineer, but I've also worked in the risk and assurance space for a large majority of my career also. So the subject of risk management of rail infrastructure mega projects is something dear to my heart, and obviously with the current environment that we're in, is a very topical subject at the moment. So the context of the projects and the overall theme that I'm talking about today will be a Victorian, with respect to Victorian projects. And also just to highlight, to inform this presentation, undertook an exercise of interviewing 10 leading industry professionals and also reviewed academic journals to try and get an understanding of what things can we do within the industry to increase the likelihood of us successfully delivering these projects. Okay, so it's well documented that over 60% of mega projects fail due to schedule overruns and cost blowouts. That number can be slightly different depending on what you're reading, but it's well acknowledged that a lot of projects do overrun or have schedule cost blowouts. Currently, Victoria has a large population growth, and it's forecast to hit 9.4 million in the next 30 years. So in response to this, the Australian government are investing a significant amount into infrastructure with a projected $75 billion to be invested in the next 10 years. And that number's probably gone up slightly since I prepared this presentation last year. In 2015, there was a project called the Regional Rail Link project, which many of you may be familiar with, which was the construction of a new railway line from the city down to Werribee. Now, that project was delivered on time and within budget and was kind of the flagship project for Victoria. And that gave the state confidence to start delivering more complex, more risky projects, which we're starting to see now. And I can just give a very quick summary of some of those projects that are either in progress or about to start in the future. So the first one, which is the Melbourne Tunnel Stations project, which I worked on. I've got a separate slide for that. And the advertised construction costs for that, or the overall investment cost, is $11 billion. We've got the Regional Rail Revival project, which is upgrading a number of regional railway lines. The removal of 75 level crossings. Now, that is being delivered under the Level Crossings Removal Authority, which was done as 50 level crossings in the first package. And then they got further investment for another 25 level crossings. I understand to date that 29 have been successfully delivered, and the overall cost is around $15 billion for those two packages of works, portfolios of works. And then the two latest projects, which are getting quite a lot of discussion and kudos in the press at the moment, is the Airport Rail Link. And since I've been in Victoria for the last 13 years, that project seems to come up every time around election time. So it does look like it is going forward now. And then the last one, which is the Suburban Rail Loop, which is in the very early stages of the initial concept, and that's due to commence in 2022. So the first one, just for those who aren't familiar with this project, the Melbourne Metro Stations and Tunnel project is a 9-kilometre tunnel from Domain up to Arden, and it includes 5 underground stations, and these are really significant underground stations in the city. So I'm sure many of you have seen the disruption that is causing during the construction works. And effectively what this is doing is removing a bottleneck by connecting the Sunbury and the Pakenham and Cranbourne line. And the expected completion date is 2025. Now, the next one, there's not much information being advertised about this project at the moment, but this is the Suburban Rail Loop, which is effectively an underground tunnel that's going to connect 15 major hubs from the east down round to the western suburbs. And it's moving away from the radial type of rail network that we've currently got in Melbourne to a more orbital style network that we see in other countries. They call it polycentric network. And that's due to commence in 2022. From where we were with Regional Rail Link, we're successfully delivering that project, which was around the $5 billion mark. We're we're increasing the complexity in our risk exposure to these projects that are currently in progress and planned to be to commence in the next few years. So my position I put forward here is that mega projects aren't just enhanced versions of smaller projects. They are completely different in terms of our aspirations, our stakeholder involvement, and the duration and complexity. So it's not linear, it's non-linear when we increase the size and duration of these projects, which in turn creates a much greater risk exposure for us. So what can we do during the delivery to try and manage this risk? So here is just, and I know the level of calibre of people in this audience here, but just a few of the fundamentals of risk management principles that are being applied in the rail industry at the moment. So we do within the rail industry apply a risk-based approach to delivery. All projects now, and certainly ones that I've been on, do have a robust risk management plan in place. So there's a good understanding that we've got a standard of ISO 31,000, and we apply a risk management framework, and I've got an extract from that standard there. And within the rail industry, we manage risks, and this is more focused on the safety component and the rail accreditators component, but managing risks so far as is reasonably practicable. So during my discussions with industry leaders and reviewing academic journals, the one thing that always came to the top of the discussion was that leadership is really important during the delivery of these projects, particularly on a rail mega project where we're bringing together different organisations very quickly, because we don't have the capability or the capacity just to deliver these as single entities. So for design joint ventures, you'll often see many designers working together, and that brings a whole raft of different issues. So it's really important that we have good leadership in place. And some of the principles that a leader should be applying is that we should treat these mega projects more like an organisation than just a project. So it's having that CEO level of leadership and judgment that can guide the project. And also having the mentality of we need to make the delivery agent successful. So it's a win-lose together mentality, which is easier said than done, because many of these projects are a D&C contract, for example, which is more adversarial in nature. And also, strong leadership needs to be in place, but trust the processes that are in place, but leadership need to know that when to go back to first principles. So processes alone won't resolve every challenge on a mega project, and it would be dangerous just to purely rely on process. So risk culture was another theme that I identified during my investigation or review, and this is closely related to leadership. Now, again, where we've got lots of different organisations working quickly together, risk culture is a particularly difficult challenge, because every organisation has different ways of doing things and different people and different ideas. So some of the key suggestions on how to build a proactive risk culture towards risk management are: we need to make people accountable. So the leadership team need to clearly define what team members' accountability is with respect to the risk management processes and what the overall risk appetite is. Also, awareness, making team members aware of what risk management framework is in place and what the project's objectives are to risk management. There is always that pitfall where on a project you can create a risk management plan, prepare a risk register, and then it gets put in a file and no one looks at it until there's an audit or until it's the annual review of the risk register. So it's making it a live thing that everyone's aware of. And then finally, which will help drive the behaviour, is the attitude. So effective project teams not only execute projects as business as usual, but they have a mindset that they're working on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity experience. So we're changing the face of, say, Melbourne when we're working on these types of projects. So it's important to keep that in mind when we're working on them, because they are stressful and difficult projects to work on under these tight time frames and pressures. So every mega project, or every project actually, is exposed to project stakeholders, but I put forward that on these types of projects, it's important that we don't just do the initial review at the start of the project of what stakeholders are going to be impacted, but it's something that's continually assessed throughout the risk assessment and delivery process. So here I've just got an example of a tool that can be used to get an understanding of what stakeholder or what stakeholders' level of interest and power can mean to those who are delivering projects. And it's important that we continually review that, otherwise we can become very reactive. So from a design perspective, it's reacting to comments being made on our design, but we should be continually reviewing and understanding, has that stakeholder's power or interest changed as the project delivery phase has changed. So these things are very dynamic, and given the duration of these projects, these types of issues do change over time. So I'm not going to talk about risk tools in a lot of detail, but going back to my point earlier on that we should be looking at these projects more as an organisation than just a project, I think it's important to highlight that we need to invest at the start of the journey in adequate risk tools to develop these types of projects. Again, we don't want to fall into the mindset of let's get a previous risk management plan, rehash it and get an old spreadsheet and try and update that and call it risk management. We need to start customising these tools for these projects to help us and the teams to deliver effectively. So the previous projects I worked on, and I can see someone in the audience here who helped develop this tool, we developed something that was integrated into our design, and it wasn't going to the extreme of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a off-the-shelf tool that the likes of BHP or Coca-Cola would use, but we tried to find that happy medium. And what this means is that you can work from the design level, where designers who are working on the design package can raise risks and push it into this tool, but then on the opposite side you've got the senior leadership team and the risk manager who can then capture all that information and start to make useful dashboards and start to see things in real time rather than being reactive and updating a spreadsheet at the end of the month. So it's integrating it into what we do. And finally, this slide here is just highlighting the importance of we need an integrated approach to risk management, particularly where we have very common scenarios where the likes of the AROs, which is, for example, MTM, the designers and the construction teams, are all using different risk management processes. And even the fundamentals of having a different risk matrix and we're all working on the same project, it's not sustainable moving forward on these types of projects where we're all talking slightly differently. So it's just getting it to become more integrated and then incorporating things such as strategy, governance, decision making and that culture piece that I discussed, and also performance, continually providing training and guidance on how to use them throughout project delivery. So in summary, megaprojects should be treated more akin to an organisation because complexity is non-linear. For risk management processes to be successful, it's important that we have the appropriate leadership in place which can cultivate a positive attitude towards risk management and embracing the long-term advantages that brings. The risk assessment process should consider and include risk analysis throughout project delivery. It shouldn't be a static thing. And we need to make sure that we invest in effective risk management tools at the start of the project. And finally, apply an integrated approach to risk management throughout delivery.